So I am so happy that you're joining me on another episode of Flow. Today's guest is an actor, a playwright, a rapper, and an educator. He's won numerous awards, including a Lucille Lortel Award, Doris Duke Artist Award, Andrew W. Mellon Foundation Playwright in Residence, an NEA Artworks Grant. My next guest is none other than hip hop theater pioneer, Will Power.
What's up, man?
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I am such a big fan of yours. I want to talk a little bit about the first time that I met you, to give, someone who might be watching this or listening to this a little context. So I went to undergrad at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, and we seriously lacked racial diversity on our staff. As a student body, we were very vocal about that. As a Black student body, we were very vocal about that, especially. And to the faculty's credit and the administration's credit, I think they started to listen to what we were saying. And one of the most brilliant moves they made around that time period was bringing in this genius of a visiting scholar at that time. And that scholar's name was Will Power.
Oh, I thought you were talking about somebody else.
No.
I was shaking my head like, I thought you were talking about Jose Bowen and somebody else. Like that.
They brought you in and we were all super excited. I remember I was reading up on some of your plays and like, who is he? What has he done? And like getting really excited about it, especially when I saw how far into the space of hip hop theater you had pushed years before In the Heights and definitely years before Hamilton. The pure genius that I witnessed during that office hours. I mean, you talked for about 45 minutes and then there was 10 minutes where you flowed to Jose D. Bowen playing the keyboard. And my mind was absolutely blown. The way you blend together hip hop, theater, arts education, politics. I don't think there is another Will Power. And although many are trying now, I don't think there ever will be another Will Power. And that was my introduction to you and your work. So thank you.
Let me say, I really appreciate those words, man. That means a lot to me. And, it's kind of like, it's almost always from the students or young people or some kind of interface between younger and older. And so I feel like, that's just one more example of how you all brought me there, Like we want to see more of this energy on campus in our faculty and staff. But it was students that were voicing this years ago, years ago, that sometimes those institutions takes a long time. And actually some of those students that were voicing it aren't here anymore, like they already graduated. And so one woman that was really vocal about it, she just graduated and I'm coming in now. So I feel like sometimes the things that we advocate for, we don't often personally benefit sometimes, but then we carry that forth and the people coming after us benefit. Just like there's things there's giants that I'm standing on the shoulders of, people that some are recognized, some are not even as recognized, but their legacies is deep and there's no way I'd be here at this place if it wasn't for them, So I thank you for that. I appreciate that a lot. That means a lot to me for you to say that.
Tell us a little bit about your background and what was it like for you growing up?
I was born in New York City, but I was raised in California. When I was about 3.5, my family, my mother and my father moved to San Francisco. My father was originally from San Francisco and my mother was from New York City. So they moved there for a number of reasons. The snow was getting a lot. My father had a whole bunch of parking tickets because he was a New York cab driver and they were coming after him. And also, my father by that time had a really intense drug habit. He had a heroin addiction. And so the idea was that if he moved away, he'd be able to cure it. But of course, you can't move away from an addiction. Where you go, it goes, you know what I mean? Until you deal with it, you know? But that was the idea. And so we moved to the Bay Area. I grew up in the Fillmore district, which was a really potent, culturally rich, economically poor community in San Francisco. But I grew up there. And just in brief, the background was like a real rich, vivid culture, you know. Both of my parents were like in the movement in the 60s. My father was in SNCC, and, you know, he was at Bloody Sunday, and, you know, there's no books about him, but he's mentioned in a few books, like, you know, biographies of Stokely Carmichael and that kind of stuff. So he was there and doing that. My mother was in the Communist Party, and so they were very active in that. And so I grew up in the 70s, kind of right after that time, but it was still very much a part of my background in the 70s, you know what I mean? So just going to demonstrations, and, you know what I mean? And just the color and just the vividness of our people, the characters and the language. And, you know, I kind of grew up right in the heart of that, you know?
Well, that was so colorful and so rich. I find myself relating to so much of what you shared. It makes so much sense when someone reads your work or watches you perform. I want to ask, when did you realize that you had this incredible ability to be able to connect thoughts and words literally in milliseconds to make meaning and creativity and quite frankly, just like beauty out of what it is that you do? When did you realize you had that ability?
Well, my mother said that I was always, like probably a lot of people's mothers say, you know, I was always kind of rambunctious and performing at 2 years old and 3 years old, you know what I mean, doing stuff. The first time it really made sense to me was that there was a woman in Sunrise group named, well, we called her name was Judith Holton, but she went by Wisteria, you know? And she's in a lot of his stuff in the 70s. Like, she's in his movie, she dances, and she's in, like, they play Saturday Night Live, like you can see her in there. Anyway, so after a number of years of touring and being in the group, she came back to the Bay Area and she started a children's theater company, you know? And this was like a Afrocentric science fiction, you know what I mean? Sunrise Theater Company. So we were doing all these crazy shows, like The Day Black Folks Left Planet Earth and all this spacey stuff. And it was a real like local thing right in the Fillmore, right? So that's when I started to really do theater as an artist. I'd seen plays, but that's the first time I was about 10 years old. And I saw the effect that the shows had on the audiences. The audiences were like community, family and community members right locally. And so the shows were about like Black people in space and all this kind of stuff, but it was also really rooted in the issues and the challenges that were going on locally in the early 80s at that time, you know what I mean? And so I just saw the effects of this performance and what performance can do to validate, to reflect, but also to challenge and to push. And ideally, it's a place where either one community gets together or multiple communities get together to dialogue and argue and debate and discuss and to kind of connect, you know, around this story that they saw. So that was the first time that I think that I really saw what it could do. But it was really well put on children's theater. But that's kind of the basis. That's kind of the first time I really felt like, and I used to play basketball and stuff, but I think by the time I was like 11, 12, I was like, this is what I want to do. I didn't know what it was going to be. You know, the writing came a couple of years after that. I started to write when I was more 14. That came later. There wasn't a lot of models, but I was like, okay, this is something I want to do. Just the energy between performer and audience, or even writer and audience, to be able to say what you want to say is really palpable and really powerful. So that was probably the first time there.
When did you start to realize that you were really pioneering this genre of theater? When did you start to realize, okay, there's really no one else writing like this in this style, and especially fusing the worlds together? Yeah,
so I think, this is something that I would love someone to write a book about, maybe yourself or maybe somebody, because I think there's a whole history there, not of me, but of that movement that I don't feel has been adequately told. You know, hip hop culture for the most part started in New York City. That history has been documented pretty well. Hip hop theater, which is an outgrowth of a part of hip hop culture, didn't start in one place. It started in a handful of cities at the same time by a handful of artists that really didn't know each other. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like one locale, and it was really like these people that were kind of like theater artists, and they also were breakdancers, or they were MCs, and they also were like musical geeks. Basically what happened for me was that, you know, I was a theater artist as a kid, and then around 1985, I started getting into hip hop. I started to rhyme, you know? And at that time, theater and performance and drama was something I wanted to do for my living. Hip hop was something we took very serious. So I didn't really think we could make a living at it. I was just like, it was something that was really fun to do. So that's kind of how it started. But even in hip hop as an MC, the things that I gravitated to a lot were the story. It just started to blend over the years. You know, I had this group called Midnight Voices that me and my friend developed, and we got really popular locally in the early 1990s. But it was challenging because our live shows were really electric, but we could never capture the same essence in the records. Our records were good, but they weren't as good as the other guys. We had a lot of like developmental deals with Sony and all this kind of stuff. And it was real frustrating because all these other guys were on like Yo MTV Raps and all this stuff. And we were like, man, our shows, we'd have 300, 400, 500 people come to our shows. You know what I mean? So, and it was like, they were just these blowout shows. So it became real frustrating. But then I started to realize, I'm like, oh, you know, maybe our live show is the main event for us. You know, I just had this epiphany once, and it wasn't necessarily overnight, it was over time, because we were trying to put like a circle into a square, you know? And we were like, oh, maybe our CDs are supposed to be used to get people to our live show. Where a lot of my other friends, they did the live show to get people to buy CDs, you know what I mean? And this is before the internet really was just starting to come out. So people were buying $15, $20 CDs. So I was like, oh, maybe that's what it is, you know? And so I started to think about like, how can I restructure this a little bit, you know? And instead of doing 3 or 4 or 5 minute story songs with theatrics, what if I moved it into a theater and told one story over 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, all in rhyme, you know? That's kind of the beginnings of it from my side. I came out of the upper room, you know, Rennie had his own collective of dancers. That came out of that, Philadelphia, whatever it was called. The DC, Tony Blackman, you know, she started doing her own brand of theater, and then she became one of the first people to kind of go international. And I mean, I was doing international too, but like really with the State Department. I did that later, but she was the first one to be like one of the first hip hop ambassadors to do like stuff with the State Department. And then Camila Forbes and Hip Hop Theater Junction, out of that came Sam Yenny, who's an amazing artist out of DC. Also Chadwick Boseman, who's the Black Panther, he came out of that. He was a hip hop theater artist, you know, and a great writer too, people don't know. And then Camila now, she runs the Apollo, you know? So they came out of that. And then New Eurekans, of course, you had Sarah Jones, you had Reggie Gaines, you had Saul Williams, and a whole bunch of other people. Some of us started to travel. So I started going to New York. The New York people started going to London. When I was doing my first solo theater show, hip hop theater show, which was my first solo show, was really what I started to really tour nationally. I went to the National Black Theater Festival because my mentor had one of the stages there, Rodessa Jones. And so there in 1999, I don't know why, but that particular National Black Theater Festival, a lot of us were there. So that's where I met like Tony Blackman, Camila Forbes, wow. You know what I mean? Wow. With Kirby Hines. I was like, what? Oh, you doing this? Well, I'm doing this. You doing this? Well, I'm doing this. You know, it was like, oh, it was just like almost a tough, because before that we were kind of in our own silos, and like, you know, I was calling it the hip hop musical. And in California, people were like, what is this? Is anybody else doing this? What is this? You know, but I didn't know no one else that was really doing it, you know. At that conference, at that festival, we started meeting each other. And so then Holly Bass wrote the first article in American Theater magazine about hip hop theater a couple of months after that. And then a couple of months after that, Issa Davis wrote one in The Source, right? And so that's kind of when we start to get to know each other. Yeah, it's crazy, man. And then the following year, Danny Hawk and Clyde Valentine, and Clyde now is at SMU, they put on the first hip hop theater festival. Hip Hop Theater Junction with Camilla Forrest, they were the first ones to really, that I saw to really have like, you know, like graffiti in their set design. It seems crazy. It seems like a no-brainer now, but I was like, oh man, that's crazy. You know, they had this set design that was like, you know, graffiti, and they had these people stuck in there, kind of like the Wiz, and then they kind of peeled out of the graffiti wall. I was like, oh, I've never seen that. You know, I was the first cat to really bring rhyme into theater, you know what I mean? Now there have been maybe like someone does like a little rap or something like as a kind of like gimmick or something like that, but I was the first cat to say, you know, how do you, like an epic poem, how do you bring rhyme in and use that as your basis for language to tell stories? I think I was the first dude to really do that for an evening length with the Gathering and Flow and then the Seven, you know? And then I also my contribution to that was also like some DJing stuff when I started working with DJ Reborn. So yeah, that's a little bit about it, you know. But it was kind of like these men and women who kind of were creating in these different spaces. The London thing is interesting. There were some cats out there that were doing crazy stuff, man. So, but that's kind of how it was, and it was interesting, man. Like I know, like initially, some of my early works in the '90s locally was group hip hop theater works, but how I got out there as nationally was doing like solo theater works. You know what I mean?
But it's so epic. It's so epic. I kind of wanted to get your hot take around the taking down of Confederate monuments has been real big in the news lately, and I just kind of wanted to get your hot take around that as an act of political resistance.
Yeah. I think it's huge, man. It's symbolic, but symbols have great power. So I think it's a powerful moment. And like a lot of things in this country, it's come as a result of great sacrifice and some bloodshed. I don't know if it has to always be like that, but you know, George Floyd, or you know, the flag being taken down in South Carolina came right after the church massacre. You know what I mean? And so I think sometimes people have a more of an openness to do something in light of a great tragedy. I'm not saying it has to be like that, but that's kind of how I think it's been around these Confederate monuments. Again, prior to living here in Los Angeles, where I am now, I was in Decatur, Georgia, which is right outside of Atlanta, right? And it's a real cool place, real progressive. And there was a Confederate monument in the town square. And I was really upset, like, why is there a Confederate monument in the town square? And the thing is that Decatur was very progressive. They were trying to take it down for years, but there's a statewide mandate, that you couldn't take down Confederate monuments. You know what I mean? So it's almost like this thing that's really becoming really acute now between the states fighting, like the government, the federal government in battle with the state, and then the state, in some cases, in battle with the local. I think with the monuments, it's really fascinating and really exciting. It ultimately, real action steps have to follow that, you know what I mean? But I think it's really, really huge. Before they took down the monument last year, what Decatur did was they like, we can't take it down legally, so we're gonna put up another monument that gives context to the Confederate monument. So They put up this other monument that was like, be clear, the monument to your right is white supremacy. Like, it was pretty cool. They were like, you know, and I kind of was I actually was good with that. I was good with both of those existing with that context. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, okay. But then earlier this year, after the George Floyd thing, they came, the government, they came and took that mug down. And so I think right now with this monument and all the things that's happening in the country, it's a great reckoning right now. It'll be interesting to see, Durell, there's definitely going to be some changes. It'll be interesting to see whether those changes are substantial or whether they're going to be substantial, but how much are they going to change? Is it going to be kind of like during the Civil War where, you know, emancipation happened, which was huge for our ancestors, but they gave 40 acres and then they took it back?
No, I think you're 100% correct. It's something I've been saying to friends or colleagues when the topic comes up. I have no doubt that Black people as a people, that we will get to that quote unquote promised land that Dr. King talked about. My only question around it is, you know, how many of us will get there and what shape will we be in once we arrive?
I think going back to art, I think art can play a real key part of pointing the direction, whether that's in form, like you said, creating new art forms that address things. Like I feel like the other thing with hip hop theater was that we needed that new form to explore and to express what was going on. You know, there's a big question in our community and in my mind always as an artist about like, you know, can we find our place in the United States or not? You know what I mean? And unfortunately, that's still an open question. I would like to think that by 2020, we'd all be clear, like, yes, we can find our place in the United States, and we just need to work at it. That's a big question too. Like, can we get our piece here, or do we have to go somewhere else? Where would that be? Big questions, you know what I mean? Big questions, you know, what would that mean, you know?
Something pretty significant did happen in American politics with Kamala Harris being selected as Joe Biden's running mate, marking the first time that a Black woman has been selected as vice president on a major political ticket, because it's not the first time a Black woman has ran for vice president. I just want to be clear about that. But on a major political ticket, what do you think this sort of says about the moment that we are in as a people in our trajectory in this country?
Yeah. I think you said it better than I could say it. You know, I just think this moment is so critical. It's so essential to the question of who we are as a nation. You know what I mean? You know, who we are and who do we want to be, and really the world too. You know what I mean? Who we are, who we want to be, and I think that's a huge step forward in equity and justice in bringing that sister on the ticket. You know, we need people like her who are strong, who are powerful, who have a track record, who are tough. Like, she's tough. I have no worry about her and Pence or her debating Trump. Like, she'll take them out. She'll take them out in the debate. You know what I mean? Like, she's a tough person. Like, she you know, so I'm excited about that. But if they can win, you know, by doing that, he's really setting her up. And I think everyone knows this, and Black folks know, to be basically the presidential nominee.
Exactly.
In 8 years, maybe 4.
Exactly.
You know, but even if it's 8 years, let's just say it's 8 years. Let's just say he tries to hang out. I mean, he'll be 82 in 4 years. That's kind of old, but let's just say she'll only be 63. So she'll be like 10, 12 years younger than Trump is now. So even if it's 8 years from now, she'll be 63. She'll be like, she won't be too old. You know what I mean? So like, he's really kind of priming her to be like, we could have a Black woman president. Ooh, like in our lifetime, like in the next decade, you know, so that maybe the next 5 years. The United States has enough money. We could put a school in every Black community, right? Let's even take the wealthy Black people out. Let's just say poor, working class, and middle class Black communities. We could put a school in every community that's as good as the top private schools with 10 students per class. We can make business loans available. We can
revolutionary.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We could say every African American student, when you get into college, you get a free ride. So if you get into Harvard or you get into, you know, Alabama State or whatever, we'll pay everything so that when you come out, you won't have that kind of debt, so you can start building economic wealth. Those are the kind of reparations I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Money for mental health, you know, like that kind of thing. Like, I think we could do that as a country, but we have to decide to do that. I think that I would love to see this moment be a total transformation, that people really come out with their hearts and be like, we're gonna set aside money. What is it, 5% of the military budget? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? We got trillions of dollars on bombs. How many more bombs do we need to be like, we're gonna put this towards this? You know what I mean? There's some things that we have to do for ourselves that no one else can do, regardless of how it was started or why it's here. You know what I mean? So it's not just about white people or mainstream America, whatever, like giving us reparations and doing this, that we have to do some of that healing. I have to continue to do some of that healing. You know what I mean?
I think it's so important to think about, you know, how epigenetically these things that have happened to Black people as a people gets passed down. You know, it's in the air, it's in the water, it's in the semen, it's in the ovary, right, that gets passed on. And I think it's really important. You know, I was in a workshop with this trauma therapist named Resma Minikin, who's really doing some incredible work around healing. And he says, you know, black men and black women, we are not defective. We are not defective. The system is working.
Right.
The system we are in is working. And then to take that even a step further, you know, we are duty bound to heal as a people. And exactly what you were saying, I honestly believe that the only way that we're going to do that is collectively, which is exactly what you were saying. We are duty bound to heal, and we owe it not only to our ancestors and our elders, but we owe it to future generations.
That's right.
Otherwise, we're going to keep passing it on. And
That's
now,
right.
and
That's
a lot
right.
of studies have shown that even though it can, you know, there's generations and generations of trauma built up, it is possible to heal in a single generation.
Right.
It is possible to heal in a single generation.
Right. That's right, man. I can't add nothing to it. That's the work right there. And it needs to happen at an individual level, a family level, a community level, a cultural level, and then as a nation level. It needs to happen with it just, and it is, people are doing the work, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done around that. And I think, you know, as an artist and now as a father, you know, I have a family, like, you don't have to be perfect, but it's about just trying to do the best you can and trying to make it better. Try to like not make the same mistake or the same mistake as your forefather and foremother did. You know what I mean? And not to diss them, but as a gesture of respect for them. You know, like, you went through this, you either suffered through this or you perpetuate this. I'm going to try to not do this. And if our future generations can also then try to not make the same mistakes that we make, then we can push this thing on. You know what I mean? So it's not like we have to be like the perfect black man or whatever. You just have to just like move this thing on successfully, man, because there's some real trauma in our families, like you said. Yeah, so hearing you say that, man, and reaching out to me, and you know, that gives me a lot of hope and faith.
I want you to be able to plug what you're working on now. I know you have Detroit Red, Seize the King, and you're also working on a children's book as well.
Yeah. Well, those are the three pieces that I have out there in public. Seize the King, which is an adaptation of Richard III. I'm really excited about it. It goes up at the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival in this virtual reading. Next year, there's going to be some high profile, hopefully next summer, if things go good in the world with COVID, outside in the park. So a lot of these festivals that do Shakespeare in the park, next year, they're going to be doing this piece. So Classical Theater of Harlem is going to do their big summer show in the park. It's going to be Seize the King. It's supposed to be this summer, but it's going to be next summer. So I'm really excited about that. And then also down in Atlanta.
Huge.
In Atlanta at Piedmont Park next summer is part of the Alliance Theater, which is the big theater down there. They're going to produce that. So that's a piece that's doing well. It's had a few productions around the country. Detroit Red, as you mentioned, had its world premiere in Boston. We're also looking to kind of bring that to New York and probably hopefully next year, that kind of thing. And then I got a few other projects I can't really talk about, some commercial things that are happening that are going well, but they're also in holding patterns, you know what I mean? So hopefully when this COVID thing, I had a really good meeting this morning about a project, man, of trying to take something to Broadway. And, you know, it's exciting, man. So it's like, it's there, it's going to happen, and it's a kind of holding pattern. And then, like you said, I have a children's book called In the West End, which is about a little boy who finds out his grandmother has some health things, like maybe she had a heart attack or she has high cholesterol, and so she has to change her eating habits. But he's like, man, when my grandmother would cook, that's how we would bond and stuff like that. So he's like, I'm gonna help you. So he starts going through the West End, which is a historical neighborhood in Atlanta, and looking for vegan food that his grandmother can eat. You know what I mean? So like vegan mac and cheese, you know what I mean? Or like faking bacon, you know what I mean? Because the West End in Atlanta has like 6 or 7 African vegan restaurants. There's a West Indian vegan restaurant, there's Soul Veg. Wow. There's all these places. There's like a vegan donut place, all black owned. So he goes through all these places. And so that book came out as part of the Mayor's Summer Reading Club. And that went out to 17,000 young people and their families in the Atlanta area. So libraries are reading it, they're talking about it, the mayor read it, you know what I mean? And I'm working right now to get it, have a national release of that, hopefully next year. So yeah, those are the kind of things I'm working on. I'm also teaching at Occidental College. I'm a professor as you are, you're gonna be, or you are. And so, you know, part of the thing of, like you said, passing it on is also is through the teaching. It's something I'm really passionate about. So that's kind of what's going on, man.
And then very lastly, how can people keep in contact with you if they want to follow you?
I have a website, willpower.tv. It's being updated. It's up right now, but I'm redesigning it right now with a web designer, so they can Facebook me there. They can get in contact with my agent at William Morris if there's some stuff going on. They can do that. Listen, they can do the Twitter, but mostly I'm on Facebook, you know what I mean? So they can contact me there. And right now the news page is down, but my bio is there and all the articles are there. And very shortly, you can also see the news. I usually post, periodically about the things I'm doing. So that's what's going on. Let me just say, brother, I'm really excited to talk to you. It's been really inspiring. You're a great interviewer, which is not always the case, And I'm excited about this idea of hip hop scholarship. And definitely check out that hip hop theater angle, man, on writing some stuff or doing some stuff, man. There's a lot there that hasn't been written about with theater and just hip hop in general. So I'm excited that you're taking that angle, because there's so much there that it hasn't been written. As much as there's been stuff written about hip hop culture, there's a lot that hasn't been written about, and it's still being developed,
Well, and this is like how I'll close it out. Hip hop as an art form, I don't believe will ever die, or the culture will ever outlive it, nor will we out outlive the legend that is Willpower. So thank you so much.
Much love, man. I appreciate that, brother. Anytime, man. Yeah, good talking to you, man. Take care.
Thank you.
Much love, man.